All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Erin, meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Newport, Morehead City, joined by Shane Kearns. He's here because he is an expert in our office for water levels. So you may have seen him before a lot when we deal with inland flooding and things like that. We brought him in because he looked at some things regarding swell and timing. So he's going to give us a little bit more of an update on that here in a couple minutes. But the bottom line up front, if you haven't already seen, the tropical storm watches and the storm surge watches were upgraded to warnings, more confidence. We're a little bit closer, so that's why those have been upgraded. Other than that, no huge changes. We're just bringing you some more details in terms of refining the forecast, adding some values, a little bit more clarity to the forecast now that we're getting a little bit closer. One thing I do want to call your attention to, and we dealt with this during Florence, please do not look at the category of the storm or whether Erin's strengthening or weakening or what it is actually doing, because we got off a call with the Hurricane Center and they said there'll be some fluctuations over the next day or two. But if I could scream this really loud, our impacts will not change. Our impacts will not change. So please just pay attention to what we're saying and the Hurricane Center is saying in terms of impact. Don't pay attention to that category scale as it goes up and down. Please remember that. The other reason why I want to point out something to you is we've got the forecast cone on here, and you know that's where the most likely path of just the center of the storm will go. But we always say impacts occur well away from that center. We superimpose those tropical storm force winds on this graphic. That lighter shade of orange, that's more than 200 miles from the center. So even though the center is still expected to go off the coast, we do expect those tropical storm force winds to reach our coast, and that's why that watch for tropical storm conditions has been upgraded to a warning. We mentioned the storm surge warning. This replaces a storm surge watch. We're a little closer in time, more confidence. This is issued for 3 feet or greater of inundation. Those are normally dry areas, low-lying areas near the ocean specifically that could have multiple feet of water. Specifically, we're talking 2 to 4 feet of water above normally dry ground. We do want you to keep in mind, though, that does not include wave action on top of it. So we're going to have a lot of strong waves. Shane is going to talk about that in a second. We really do think it's going to be a bad situation on the Outer Banks, specifically Ocracoke and also Hatteras Island. And we still think that some of those roads may be impassable or inaccessible for multiple days. This is a very long duration event that we expect on the Outer Banks. This has probably caught your attention the last couple of days. We've increased waves just a tiny bit, 15 to 20 foot waves breaking in the surf zone. And as we've mentioned all week, and Shane's going to cover this, the period between those waves, 15, 16, 17 seconds, is very long. So we have a tremendous amount of energy coming toward the coast. We'll start to see some issues tonight, but it's multiple tide cycles that we're worried about, and that's what Shane's going to cover. Our biggest threat is on the Outer Banks, Highway 12, places like that. So I'm going to slide out of the way. Shane has worked very hard on this. He's going to talk about how it's not just going to be one day, one afternoon, and then Erin moves on. It's going to be multiple tide cycles in terms of what we're concerned with in terms of the swell. So Shane's going to cover this part.
Thank you, Eric. So to give some more details on kind of the scenario, which is one that we maybe haven't seen in a long time, if ever, is the significant swell energy moving towards the Outer Banks and also down across the Crystal Coast and Onslow County. So for starters, we're already seeing waves or swells 8 to 10 feet building up this afternoon. And we saw maybe a couple of issues across the Outer Banks, very minor from this morning's high tide. This afternoon's high tide should maybe be about the same. It's really not until we get into tomorrow, specifically tomorrow evening's high tide around 6 p.m. That's going to be when we start to see the wave energy a couple orders of magnitude higher than what it currently is. So currently, in terms of energy, don't pay attention to the units, but we're sitting at about 1,000 to 2,000. Wednesday evening, that number jumps up to 4,000 to 6,000. And then Thursday morning, really Wednesday night into Thursday morning, that value jumps up another order of magnitude to like 25,000 to 30,000, as much as that. So that's really the kind of unpredictable aspect of this, is how much of an impact is that increased swell energy going to have on the local roads and infrastructure. And you could have problems the whole time, but specifically the hours around high tide are going to be when the situation is the most impactful. And then noted on this map here is the swell direction. So today through Thursday, the hurricane is to our southeast, and so we're having a nice feed of southeast swell. So that's going to affect it's going to affect the Northern Outer Banks somewhat, but to a lesser degree. But it's really not to get to Rodanthe south into the Outer Banks, Ocracoke, down to the Crystal Coast that you're getting that direct swell concentration right towards the coast. So the biggest issues for those beaches and those coastal areas are going to be tomorrow through Thursday morning. And then what we're monitoring is a situation on Thursday where the swell direction is going to kind of change to the east and eventually northeast. And so that's going to bring extended swell energy to the Outer Banks north of Hatteras Island through at least Friday. And it could go maybe even into this weekend, depending on how the swell forecast changes. Additionally to that, water levels are going to be high with a combination of the tide and also, or the astronomical tide, and then the surge coming from the winds increasing late tomorrow into Thursday. The highest water level, high tide, looks to be Thursday evening, but there will also be higher than normal tides Thursday morning and Friday morning. So the day after day effect of some of this wave run up and beach erosion may weaken any remaining dunes or structures by the end of this week. So those later high tides may end up being really impactful too, even though the swell energy is coming down.
All right, appreciate it, Shane. And I hope everybody heard that point. We mentioned long duration, multiple tides, but what he just said, even though swells may be diminishing later in the week, we are much, much more vulnerable potentially because of all that impact earlier in the week. So appreciate that, Shane. And we'll keep Shane on for any of the hard questions, right? We'll give him the hard ones. So kind of putting it all together, the reason why that coastal storm or the storm surge watch was upgraded to a warning 2 to 4 feet above normally dry ground. We're still expecting the most impactful conditions, certainly oceanside, but later into Wednesday night, especially Thursday, as that winds, those winds pick up from the north to northeast, we will have some sound issues 1 to 3 feet above dry ground and those locations as well. But by far, the oceanside areas are our biggest concern. As we shift south, not as much of a concern as the Outer Banks, but still pretty hefty. We've got a coastal flood warning for Carteret and also southern Onslow County. That's specifically for the down east communities off of the Pamlico Sound, but also North Topsail. We've mentioned North Topsail over and over again. That's another area we're very, very concerned. Very similar to what Shane was saying about the swell coming on in. So in those areas, 2 to 3 feet, the Crystal Coast, 1 to 3 feet down East Carteret County. That's on a north wind coming down the Pamlico Sound. We'll have some water level rises up the Neuse in places like New Bern and Oriental, but not super impactful, more of a nuisance type of scenario. But on the Crystal Coast, especially as you head around the bend west of the White Oak River toward North Topsail Beach, there's some vulnerability there. 2 to 3 feet locally could be higher. So that's why we're concerned with North Topsail Beach, kind of circling those areas out to make them stand out for extra preparedness. As far as the winds go, there's a reason by design we put this at the end, not as impactful. Not expecting widespread power outages. Most of the wind is confined to the coast, but we have upgraded that tropical storm watch to a warning in coordination with the National Hurricane Center. The strongest winds are going to be over the water and the immediate coastline. You can see it nicely on this map. Again, as you get west of New Bern, Greenville, Kenansville, Plymouth, just a little bit of a breeze as we head into the day later Wednesday and Thursday. The core of the winds definitely Wednesday afternoon through Thursday afternoon. So about an 18 to 24-hour period of the stronger winds, the highest along the Outer Banks. But again, with that north to northeast wind, that will pile up the water, places like down East Carteret County, up the Neuse River. So we will have some minor sound side issues because of the wind. For the most part, wind not impactful. It's more about the direction and duration could cause some water issues along the sounds. We really, really appreciate your messaging with this. We know some beaches are closed, red flags are flying. I think we have all done a great job getting out this message with rip currents. The thing I want you to put in the back of your head as Erin departs, it's not a snap of the fingers that the ocean returns to normal. So still rough conditions, as Shane mentioned, Friday, maybe even to the weekend. So we're prepared on the front end. Let's not let our guard down for the back end as Erin departs. What you see is what you get. We're going to continue this cadence through Wednesday. Right now, we're still anticipating another briefing out by 6 o'clock this evening, another one by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. That will continue right into the day Thursday. And then we'll do our last webinar unless we need to do an additional one this time tomorrow at 12:30. If you just joined us, you missed it, you didn't understand something Shane said, you want to share it with somebody, we'll do the same thing we always do. We're going to cut this up, cut out the questions, and put this part on YouTube afterwards. So feel free to share that as necessary. So at this time, we'll be happy to take any questions. We'll pull Shane back in here. You can ask them through chat. You can raise your hand and we'll unmute your mic and we'll just take it from there. But please call the office if you need anything more specific. We'll certainly walk you through any scenarios one by one. So I'm going to unshare our screen here and then we'll get to some questions.